Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Florida Smart Agriculture. This is taking place during Florida Climate Week 2025, and we are thrilled that you chose to be part of this particular program. I want to thank you for joining, and I think you're going to find this to be a very interesting topic as it relates to quality of life in Florida. But before getting into our program today, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a big thank you and shout out to Volo Foundation for supporting this work of addressing climate challenges in Florida, for being leaders in a very difficult time talking about climate change, for carrying solutions forward and bringing more and more people into the conversation about how we can adapt, improve resilience, and mitigate the impacts. Volo Foundation has been supporting Florida Smart Agriculture that I'm a part of for the past 5 years at least, and we could not do our work without them. So we really thank them. Today, we're going to be talking about circular systems in agriculture. And I'm not the technical expert here. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. But it's all about how we can migrate and transition from a linear way of producing food, feed, and fiber, where you take, make, and dispose, to a more circular system where we make, we reuse, we recycle, and we retain value at the farm or the forest level. So be thinking about this as we gear up and go through our program. Today, we're joined by a great collection of folks that are going to be helping us understand what this circular system is about. We have Ana Martin Rials from the University of Florida, Courtney Gerges, a reporter and writer on my team, Megan Austin, a dairy farmer and veterinarian, John Dooner with the Southern Forestry Consultants, and we'll be talking about woodlands and forests, and Ed Childs, a farmer, owner of Gamble Creek Farm and a restaurateur. And each of these folks is going to be providing background that will help you better understand how agriculture is evolving and changing and being more relevant today. A little background just on who we are. Solutions from the Land is a farmer, forester, scientist-led, not-for-profit, and we are working across the country and globally to advance agricultural solutions to global challenges. And people used to think of agriculture as the sector that produced food and fiber, but we do so much more than that. We filter and store water, we sequester carbon, we enhance biodiversity. And these are all ecosystem services that sustainably managed farms, ranches, and forests deliver. And we want to take those solutions and advance them so that they can be valued, recognized, and the producers that produce them to be compensated and recognized in the marketplace. In terms of Florida, we have been working in Florida for over 5 years with a self-directed team of farmers, ranchers, foresters, and scientists that are thinking about the future of Florida agriculture. And they're approaching this from the standpoint of not what we used to be, but what we can be today to improve quality of life as we scale up the delivery of these ecosystem services, whether you're in the Panhandle or all the way down to the tip of Florida in the Keys. We are co-led by Jim Strickland and Lynetta Usher-Greiner. Jim is a cattle rancher from the southern part of the state. Lynetta Usher-Greiner is up outside of, I think it's Levy County, just north of Tampa, and she is both a cattle owner and a timber producer. And they've done a wonderful job of guiding and supporting this self-directed group of volunteers that have been taking us forward. This little schematic just is a visual picture of us migrating from the current state where there are lots of challenges in Florida of agriculture, as well as things that are going well, and thinking about how do we move to a future state where we can ensure that we can keep Florida's agricultural lands in production. Because if we lose these landscapes, they're likely to go to development. And when they go to development and they become hardscape surfaces, we've lost the ability to deliver these ecosystem services. So this is a journey, and it's one that will continue on for years to come. Each year we take a different priority topic and focus on it. And this year we're working on circular systems. Um, these are some of the past work streams that we've been involved with, everything from using artificial intelligence and machine learning to quantify ecosystem service delivery, to a very focused effort to bring aquatic and agricultural stakeholders together in the Swanee River Basin under our Healthy Farms, Healthy Bays initiative. We've done work on solar energy. We've done a lot of communications outreach work, and now we are up to the circular bioeconomy work stream that we'll be talking about today. And what this really boils down to is how this approach to farming can deliver benefits to the producer as well as to the public at large. And today, we're going to be spotlighting some examples of these systems and practices that are underway in the state and talking about the experimentation that's going on, the lessons that are learned, and the benefits that they're providing. So with that, I am going to stop screen sharing and move right into our program. And our first speaker today is Dr. Anna Martin-Rials, Assistant Professor in the Agriculture and Biological Engineering Department at the University of Florida. And her research focuses on conversion of organic waste, bio-based resources through process design and modeling, as well as life cycle analysis and assessment in agri-food systems. She has a longer bio that will appear in the promotional material to the webinar today, but to save time for the presentations, let's just turn it right over to Anna. Anna, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Ernie. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to be speaking a little bit more generally about just the concept of circular bioeconomy and really what that is. You all can see my slides okay? Yes. Okay. So when we talk about the circular bioeconomy, we're really talking about an economy that's powered by nature and natural resources. And the aim is really to provide sustainable well-being through this provision of ecosystem services, as Ernie kind of alluded to, and sustainable management of our biological resources. So it's combining the principles of circular economy, which are really to eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature, with this focus on using renewable biological-based resources. So as Ernie mentioned, we're trying to transition away from our more current linear economy, where we take resources from the environment, use them to produce our products, use those products, and then typically dispose of products after their use. And we want to move towards more of this circular approach where we can try to lengthen the lifetime of products or reutilize the materials in those products to then reuse, recycle, and create new products without having to take new resources from the environment. So really trying to keep our materials and resources in use within our economy, emphasizing these areas of maintenance, reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, and recycling. The bioeconomy is a separate concept that's really looking at our economic activity that's utilizing these biological resources from nature, such as crops, trees, fish, animals, microorganisms, and leveraging those resources to produce various goods, services, or energy. So really thinking about the resources that we get from agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and then the various products that we can generate from those biological resources. And then also thinking about how can we then convert the wastes of those products back into carbon, water, nutrient that can be fed back into our agricultural systems. So when we combine those two concepts together, the circular economy and our bioeconomy, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a nice illustration of that in their butterfly diagram here, where we can see the principles of the circular economy on the left in their technological loops, combined with those concepts related to the circular bioeconomy on the left in their biological loop. And really the focus when we think about that biological loop is this idea of regeneration and really resupplying our systems, our agricultural systems, with those nutrients and water and carbon coming from bio-based resources. And so at the heart of regeneration is farming. Regenerative farming is a key practice in our circular bioeconomy, really trying to implement practices that will allow nature to rebuild soils and increase biodiversity. You can see some of the core principles of regenerative agriculture down at the bottom here, trying to minimize soil disturbance, maximize crop diversity, keeping soils covered, maintaining year-round productivity or root health, and then also maybe integrating crop production with livestock production. At a wider scale, we're thinking about bringing those biological materials back into our agricultural systems after their end of life, and ultimately focusing not on just sort of not harming the environment, but really thinking about how can we regenerate and improve the environment, support these ecosystem services while we're producing various products. At the cascade level, we're thinking about how can we really get more out of a product or out of its byproducts. So as we start to generate byproducts or wastes in all of these different levels of the food supply chain, thinking about how we might be able to upcycle those byproducts into other higher value products. So that's really illustrated also in the EPA's food waste preference scale, where ultimately we want to try to minimize the amount of waste that we produce. But as we produce byproducts from these different biological streams, can we upcycle or maybe leverage those biological byproducts for feed, or then eventually start to think about producing different high-value chemicals from that or recovering energy and nutrients from those byproducts? There are lots of different biochemicals or biomaterials that we might be able to extract from various biological-based resources. And then ultimately, if we're producing something that really can't be reutilized as a food product or a feed product or converted into some kind of biochemical, we can then look at these bioconversion processes like anaerobic digestion or composting, which at least will allow us to capture some of the carbon, nutrients, and water and bring those back into the system as fertilizer or energy. So with all of this, I like to keep in mind the fact that circularity is really not new. Nature is circular, and what we're doing is really taking inspiration from nature as we think about building and expanding our economy. And really at the heart of being able to do this is developing an economy that supports healthy and biodiverse and resilient ecosystems, because that's really at the heart of being able to sustain ourselves and our economy. So that's what I've got. Thank you, Ernie.
Wow, thank you so much, Anna. You had a lot packed in there for sure. And we look forward to um, having a conversation as we finish our programming today. So thank you for that setup. Next, we're going to turn to Courtney Gerges. Courtney is a writer on Solution from the Lambs team, and she's been working with the panel members who are going to be speaking today, learning about what they're doing and helping to tell their stories in a major report that we're going to be releasing this fall. So Courtney lives in Oklahoma and has had the pleasure of working with our producers for the last couple of months. So Courtney, over to you to maybe set the stage for the stories that'll follow.
Yeah, thank you, Ernie. Like you said, I am based in Oklahoma, so it has been a real joy for me to get to know. We're on about 11 different producers and agriculture supporters for this circular bioeconomy report, and it's amazing the diversity of agriculture in Florida. But at the same time, all these different parts of agriculture, whether we're talking crops and beef cattle or dairy cattle or vegetables or berries or even composting with the help of worms. Um, Regardless of all those differences, there's some commonalities among everyone that I've had the chance to talk with. And that really is that all of these farmers genuinely care about the land, they care about their family. They recognize that healthy soils and ecosystems is good for their production. And it's also good for their communities in terms of clean water, clean air, and they see themselves as part of that community, of course. So those are important things to them. And they also express the reality of having a land-based business. And that is working with nature can sometimes be unpredictable and messy. And in general, at the end of the day, they have to be able to make a living. They have to be profitable in order to stay on the land and continue to make good things happen on the land, improve the land. And they also see this journey as a never-ending journey. They're always going to be learning. They're always going to be coming in contact with new ideas that they can try. I like how one farmer put it, we're all environmentalists just in different ways because we have access to different resources. So in a way, circularity is kind of inherent to the culture or the mindset of a farmer. It's about being efficient. It's about taking one thing that some may call waste and making value out of it again. Um, but they see so many opportunities to continue going. And the one key barrier kind of sounds like it would be inherent also is the financial aspects of it. They're always having, since this is a business, they have to find ways to be able to afford innovation, doing things in a different way. And that takes risk, and that risk takes some bravery. So it's always very inspiring to hear these farmers talk. Yeah. So as we go into this next part of the webinar, it will be wonderful for you not just to have the chance to hear these stories from me or someone else, but from the folks themselves. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Megan Austin, who's a dairy producer and involved in lots of different circular aspects on her farm and in her community. So Megan, can you tell us a little bit about where you are and who you are and what you do and those circular stories of your farm?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Courtney, for the intro in. So I'm Megan Austin. I'm up in Marianna, Florida. So we're located about an hour west of Tallahassee in the Florida Panhandle, pretty close to both the Georgia and Alabama state lines. My family and I, we have a dairy farm, Sindale Farms. We also produce value-added products through our Southern Craft Creamery brand. So we produce a value-added artisanal ice cream with our milk, as well as bottle our own milk. Our farm is located just north of town, and both of our secondary businesses, Southern Craft Creamery, which is our ice cream manufacturing and scoop shop, is located in the heart of downtown Marianna. And right next door to it is our farm to table market. We highlight our own farm products, ice cream, milk, and beef, which I'll speak a little bit more later regarding circular systems, as well as our milk bottling facility are there on site. So we have a connection, a pretty deep connection to our local community. A little bit about dairy in general. I kind of, when I think about circular systems, a dairy cow is really the queen of them, in my opinion. On our farm, which I'll discuss in more detail, we utilize rotational grazing. So we have a cow who takes grass, and I'll speak to how we make sure that grass is of the highest quality because of our soils. She turns that grass into milk, and then we can provide that to our local community. But at the end of her life as a productive milk cow, that's not the end for her. She then segues into beef production, providing a secondary protein source for our local and beyond communities. So I think dairy in general is pretty unique because of the aspect of just the cow in and of itself and what she's producing. Our farm specifically, we're on the smaller end for both state and national average. We milk around 200 head and have just under 400 total animals. We raise all of our own replacements, so we have young stock all the way up to milking age cows on farm. I mentioned the beef from the milking adult dairy cow side. We also raise beef from some of our dairy bulls. So our young bulls are turned into steer, and we raise them up alongside our heifers on our farm, and they become a marketable protein source through our farm to table market. A little bit more about our circular systems on our farm. Since we are smaller, we are able to utilize rotational grazing, and a big focus of that is soil health. My husband often tells groups that come to visit, we never buy fertilizer. And the way we produce fertilizers by starting with that grass and the feedstuffs. So we do have to supplement our cows, even though we are grazing, to make sure we're maintaining an adequate nutritional plane for their lactational cycle. But any of our feedstuffs that we purchased are often byproducts. They're upcycled from other industries, such as the citrus industry. Cattle are great converters of what we might consider garbage in a sense, that would go to landfills, and instead it provides a wonderful nutritious feed for cows. So we can use citrus pulp, we can use byproducts of the cotton industry, whether that be cotton seed itself or cotton seed hulls. We can also utilize lots of different byproducts from the corn industry and the ethanol industry, as well as beer and distilling. So again, dairy cattle being the queen of circular systems, you can take those feedstuffs. So we'll buy in some that as locally as possible, and then we rotationally graze our fields. The cow consumes that. She produces milk for us, but then she also produces a fertilizer for us and manure. And that manure, if she's on the field, she's depositing herself. But if it's within our barn system, so either our feeding barn or within our milking parlor, all of those are flushed and contained within a centralized location. It's actually kind of a two-stage water and nutrient management a separating system. So we can separate our solids from our liquids. The liquids can then be sprayed back on our rotational grazing pastures as fertilizer. So our fertilizer starts at the beginning when the cow's consuming, and then it returns to the soil through her manure. And then the cycle starts again. So dairy farms in general do a pretty fantastic job of recycling water also on their farms. So any water that hits the ground on any pavement, so within the barns, is often, almost always recycled on dairies at least one time, sometimes as many as 4 times. So since I mentioned our farm is smaller, we don't have the ability to utilize multiple recycling systems like some larger farms might, but we do reutilize everything that hits the pavement or is used in our wash systems. It's recycled through our lagoon effluent systems and then is sprayed back on our pastures. So I think I've kind of spoke to the big aspects within our farming system and how those relate to the kind of circular economy within agriculture.
Thank you, Megan. And I know on Megan's farm, they have an area where they keep in trees and woodland, and it provides wildlife habitat. So our next speaker is John Dooner, and he works with a lot of different producers who also have a woodland aspect to their operations and helping them balance tree production and their other goals and aspirations. And John, if you want to talk to us a little bit about the forestry industry and dairy cows are queen of circularity, but trees might be up there too.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today. So my name's John Dooner. I live in Quincy, Florida, not far from Megan, actually. And in addition to managing my family's tree farm, I work as a consulting forester, managing about 500,000 acres for other forest landowners, primarily in Florida, South Alabama, and South Georgia. My relationship with forestry goes back really before I can even remember, as my father is also in the same business. And so I was exposed to it at an early age. And what I really recognized early on was this reality that what we do today will have impacts, both negative and positive, many years into the future. And I'm sure you all understand that forestry is a long-term commitment, right? Our cropping cycle is roughly 30 years, sometimes longer than that. And circularity is really embedded in the psyche of foresters and forest landowners. We even use terminology like rotation, which is how we refer to our cropping cycle, because the only way to remain sustainable and profitable is to ensure that what we're doing today sets us up long term, to be successful. into the future. And so I think the best way to speak about forestry and how it relates to circularity is to divide the production or growing aspect of forestry um, from the manufacturing side, and I'll speak to both of those. But when we plant trees, we are, like I said, committing to about a 30-year time frame, and we're planting natural species, and then we're managing both the planted and other types of vegetation that occupy that site. And interestingly, when we look at non-industrial forest landowners, almost all of them are looking to balance the return on their investment with the conservation value associated with the property. You know, they're looking to enhance the ecological functioning of the property in addition to the performance of the investment. And so that gives us this really unique opportunity to manage. It's not a natural system, but it's a system that's made up of natural components. And early on in that life cycle, we begin making decisions that we know will affect the next rotation of trees, you know, 15, 20 years into the future. And so it's this really holistic approach where we're really assessing all aspects of the system and thinking, you know, long term, well into the future. Um, Interestingly, when we're ready to harvest our crop, um, you know, like any other commodity, we're looking to derive all the value that we can from that crop, but we're also very cognizant of the byproducts and how we can situate those byproducts on the landscape to facilitate that next rotation. But whatever material we can haul to the manufacturing facilities, we're obviously interested in doing so. And in fact, we haul different trees and even different parts of individual trees to multiple facilities from one entry into the marketplace in an effort to be as efficient as we possibly can. And this trend continues as we look at these specific facilities. For example, our pulp and paper facilities are actually utilizing residuals from sawmill facilities, which are producing dimension lumber and products like that. They're using those residuals to power the pulp facilities. So when you look at waste, or when you look at, well, really the reduction of waste and the gaining of efficiencies, you know, I think it's really encouraging and impressive what we've been able to do within this space. To add to that, you know, Ernie mentioned ecosystem services during his introduction, and something that we really we knew about, but we took for granted, I think, for a long time, was this reality that, you know, we're sequestering carbon, we're filtering water, and you know, we were happy to do so because it fit. It aligned with what we were doing to maximize production from the crop. But as the population has grown, you know, in Florida, the importance on these ecosystem services is much more evident. And, you know, we're very interested in how we can contribute to that and perhaps, you know, be rewarded for that, and how that would fit into the community as it changes. So it's, I think forestry, you know, and circularity just go hand in hand. It's something, like I said at the beginning, it's really embedded into the psyche of forestry people. And we're certainly interested in trying to be innovative and expand upon some of those aspects of our industry.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I always appreciated when John and I talked before about just the many different products that a tree can be turned into, from paper to big beams and buildings, and powering those plants, and just so much. And like he said about ecosystem services, as more pressure, as the value of the land goes up, farmers and foresters need an opportunity to um, be able to capture some of that value so they can continue being in a land-based business rather than letting that land go into a different use. So next up, we have Ed Childs, and Ed is involved in lots of different aspects of food, from production to the customer experience in a restaurant. And he also shared some very um, good points on the value that ecosystem services could have, more so for the aquaculture community. But he's involved in a lot of different things. So Ed, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and the circular systems that you see in agriculture?
Thank you, Courtney. And I want to echo what Ernie said and thank the Volo Foundation. I've had the pleasure of working with them, with Ernie and his group, for a number of years now. And I just so appreciate their critical support to support local farmers and local economies and sustainable food systems. My background is as a restaurateur. I grew up in Polk County, loving to hunt and fish and be out on the land. I used to get to spend a lot of time with my dad there. We spent our summers on Anna Maria Island, and when I got out of University of Florida with a political science degree and had to find a way to make a living, I got into the restaurant business in 1979, and subsequently uh, got involved with two other restaurants and owned three restaurants that all were on the edge of the largest Gulf in the world in Manatee County, in the only place in the country that has three national estuaries on its border: Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and Charlotte Harbor. And one of the things that really the major thing that kept me up and concerned me in the threats to our business, and when you're on the edge of the coast like that, there are many things, hurricanes, etc., that you have to contend with, but was water quality issues, specifically harmful algal blooms. There was a bloom in 95 and 96 that was just after I had started my third restaurant that was on the beach in Bradenton Beach, Florida, that moved in for 11 months and 21 days. And almost, it really had a tremendous effect on our local economy, tourist based, dead fish all over the beaches, lost a lot of employees, lost a tremendous amount of customers, had just opened a third restaurant. And so I got more and more concerned about what we needed to do to address water quality issues. That's how I came to be more involved in bivalve aquaculture, specifically bivalve and seagrass for coastal resiliency. Um, I was serving clams in my restaurant. They're a great fresh from Florida seafood. They're a very important business for aquaculture, for working waterfronts, for preserving that history of commercial fishing that is so much a part of Florida. And they're an area that really needs support because we are losing clam farmers, specifically because of harmful algal bloom issues, where their leases get sequestered, rightly so, if there are red tide events. And clams grow in an 18 to 24-month cycle. The market, the commercial market, is a fresh market. It is little neck, middle neck, top necks. And when their leases got quarantined and closed for long periods of time, the clams got too big and the farmers didn't have a market for those. And so they went out of business and they started doing something else. Clams live 35 years. So, and everything wants to eat small clams. They have to be put up nets, they have to be worked heavily. And uh, when that when that large clam is going to live 33 more years and all of a sudden it has no value, that made no sense. And it really is something that we have to address, because that clam, as much as I like them on my tables of my restaurants, is more valuable to the citizens of the state and the visitors of our state as a restoration clam, living 32 more years, cleaning water. Clams filter water. They fertilize the benthic environment. Cleaning water means you're going to have more photosynthesis. That's great for seagrass. All of that is part of forage fish habitat. All of that is part of coastal resiliency and keeping our estuaries healthy. That's critical. Florida's economy and the economies of all coastal states is built on the coast. So that was something that I got involved in. We started the Gulf Shellfish Institute to develop the science so that we can look at how much carbon is sequestered, how the organic matter in the benthic environment improves, what happens to forage fish habitat. We can't have too many clams. So that's one of the major things that we're working on. Through the restaurant business, as my career progressed, uh, I saw that it was more and more important that we support local producers, because so much stuff was being imported and was coming from other areas. And our commercial fishing industry, Cortez is one of the oldest commercial fishing communities in the state of Florida, and it is located right on the borders where we are in Manatee County. So we wanted to be supporting that. We wanted to be telling that story in our restaurants. Further getting involved in the food chain, I had the opportunity to lease a farm called Gamble Creek Farm that was 26 miles inland from where my restaurants were. We were buying over $1 million worth of produce for all three of our restaurants. And I thought, okay, let's see if we can grow our own produce. If we can add that to our story. I subsequently bought that farm. It was half organic when we took it over. It became 100% organic, and it is now one of 6 farms in the state of Florida that is a certified real organic farm. And being located on Gamble Creek, 26 miles inland, what happens in that farm and what happens in the surrounding area and what goes into that creek, which is part of the Manatee, the coastal estuary watershed, affects what happens with the harmful algal blooms and water quality where my 3 restaurants sit. So we wanted to address that in how the practices that we used in our farm, and we wanted to be about growing soil. We wanted to be about fortifying soil. We wanted to be about doing that with regenerative agriculture, with vermiculture, with the Korea National Farming molecular amendments. And we also then started a program where we took all of the food waste from all 3 of our restaurants, and instead of sending that to the landfill, we took it out to the farm. And just like what John was talking about and what Dr. Riles was talking about, we took that. We're in one of the fastest growing zip codes in the country where our farm is. It used to be all rural. Now it is all developments that are surrounding us. And so the people that were clearing the land to create more developments would bring us the wood chips because it was closer than taking them to the landfill. And we would mix them with all of that food waste, and we would then inoculate them with the microbial sprays and the different methodologies, and we would use that to build more soil. We want the farm to be a model. We're working with the Brain Health Initiative, which was started out of Harvard and UMass General to address nutrients in food and brain health and the health of our microbiomes. And so we are testing that soil in a linear nature to show how the organic matters and the nutrient levels and the selenium and the copper and the zinc and the things that we need for brain health, for healthy bodies, for healthy microbiomes, how that is increasing over time. We're working with that farm we went from a farm to adding on a farm market so that we could educate people, so people could get in touch with their food, that they could come and that we could support local producers and bring them into the farm market. So that was local eggs and local milk and local ranchers, local beef. Another program we started was a wild pig project. So I grew up hunting pigs. I knew how good they were. They're a problem in 34 states. Unfortunately, a lot of people shoot them and leave them on the ground, and they're a big problem in with farmlands, and they're a big problem in communities and in environmental lands and in parks. And so Shogun Farms out of Tampa, Florida, was doing a project where they were capturing these pigs humanely and they were bringing them to their farm and they were feeding them for 5 or 6 months and putting beautiful weight and fat and meat onto these pigs. And they were doing it with products that would be going to the landfill. So they get truckloads of surplus produce from Tampa Bay produce market and from other areas that would be going to the landfill, and they're feeding those pigs. They get pallets of Borden dairy that is within 5 days of timeout, and 1,100 pounds at a time, and feeding those pigs. We were getting them spent grains from our microbrewery partners that we dealt with in the restaurant. And so all of that feed source was creating a fabulous product out of those pigs. And we weren't just taking that, we're about now with Shogun to set up an abattoir. You know, we don't have abattoirs anymore. We don't have the slaughterhouses for local ranchers. So many of them have to take their products to send all of their products to the Midwest and to the big capo operations in the feedlots. So we're now having an abattoir set up. And in addition to that, I have one of the best charcuterie chefs in the country that was working for me in my restaurants. And we are standing up a company that will pack and ship and create artisanal cuts out of those wild boars. So that will be sausage, guanciale, capicola, bacon, hams, and I hope people will have a chance to be trying that in the near future. So those are some
You're
of the
making us
things that we
hungry.
are doing.
And I'm gonna cut you off because I'm getting hungry,
Yep.
and I think people are gonna have questions for you. You've stimulated
Yep.
so much thinking on my part and others. But let me just pause and thank all three of our producers here because this has been a phenomenal set of examples of innovation and experimentation and using basic principles to improve efficiency and improve your outputs. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Um, and I think I would start by um, just asking any of you, do you have a question of each other before I maybe come up with a few other questions that I've jotted down? Megan or Ed, John, any question of any of the other panel members?
I'm certainly excited about visiting and seeing what Megan is doing, and I'm inspired by Dr. Riles and the work she's doing at the University of Florida.
Absolutely. So Anna, you're in the Department of Agricultural and Biological Engineers, but my head is spinning with so many dimensions of this circular system conversation. You must be collaborating with other colleagues in other departments and even other colleges. Talk a little bit about the cross-boundary scientific conversations that are going on so that Megan and John and Ed can be confident with the things that they're experimenting with.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, yeah, circularity could be the whole value chain if we're thinking about a food system or our bioeconomy. And so we need to bring in partners from all those different areas. I deal a lot with organic waste treatment and management and conversion to bio-based resources, but we have colleagues in agroecology who are really thinking about carbon storage and how can we increase that in agricultural systems and rangelands and forestry. We have folks in animal science thinking about that wonderful cow and all of their productivity and benefits in the circular economy, but then how can we maintain the health and well-being of those livestock around heat and stress and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of collaboration across IFAS and the university, thinking about all these different dimensions and elements, also the social implications, looking at barriers to adoption of various kinds of agricultural practices or circular economy approaches.
Megan, back to the cows, the queen of circularity. I was reflecting on the manure and the nutrient value and how that what people think of as a waste stream is a font of other resources. So how are you land applying the nutrients in the manure? Is it liquid? Is it pumped on? And have you thought about even going to the next level of trying to capture the methane that comes off the manure and do something with it, like produce electricity or produce a natural gas?
Yeah, great question, Ernie. So on our farm, we utilize both the liquid portion and the solids of the manure. So our liquid portion is actually applied to our rotational grazing milk cow fields via a center pivot. So what you typically see on large crop production farms. Our solids have to be scooped by a tractor out of the solid separator, as we call it, and put into an actual manure spreader. And those can be taken to other portions of our farm that are not under the center pivot for the effluent. So we can provide the manure and our fertilizer in two different methods to our land. Your next question was regarding methane digestion. We have looked at that. The complexities come for us at our scale. We are too small for anyone to justify putting a methane digester on our farm. However, there are dairy farms specifically within the state who have gone that route. They're much larger with a lot more manure capacity to sustain a project that's as grandiose as that. But they are actually capturing renewable energy through their methane digesters on farm. So it's really pretty cool. And I think it's a challenge to the smaller scale farms is making sure we're utilizing things that are financially feasible to us, but are also really working with the environment in a circular system, even though we don't maybe have access to something such as great as a methane digester.
Great, thank you. John, your cropping season is much longer than everybody else's. I think you said 39 years as opposed to 8 weeks for a strawberry, maybe. So as I think about forestry, I'm hearing other voices talk about how it's a bad thing to cut a tree. And it feels like they're defining it only from the standpoint of one dimension of the conversation. But when you're managing forests for multiple outcomes, talk to us a little bit about the benefits to biodiversity when you're clearing forests or selectively cutting. More sunlight comes in, more diverse plant species and animals, wildlife. What is your experience there?
Yeah, good question, Ernie. So, yeah, interestingly, we actually use harvesting as a management tool to do some of the very things you mentioned. So we can oftentimes enhance habitats through the removal of a percentage of the specimens on a site. And of course, as a tree or a group of trees progresses through its life cycle, it's going to have benefits for various wildlife, and it's going to occupy a critical role in the system. So I think what we call selective harvesting is it's integral to biodiversity. It's integral to the maintenance of forest health. Um, and interestingly, I would even say that the final harvest, which is quite frankly the one that people typically have the most concern about, is it is a chance to begin the process, to start anew. And I think maybe the most compelling thought process behind this final harvest, or the opportunity to conduct harvesting, is is the financial implications, the reality that if a forest landowner does not have the opportunity to harvest a tree, then he or she or the ownership group will be forced to explore other uses for the land. And so, I think forestry is a renewable option, and from that sense, a much better option than a lot of alternatives we could all think about.
Courtney, at the very beginning, I think I had mentioned that you're writing a report that's going to be featuring lots of farmers and ranchers and foresters. Tell us a little bit about that, and when is that report going to be out?
Yeah, so we're writing this report, which Megan, John, and Ed are all featured in, and we also have a couple of beef cattle producers who are integrating with crop production. We have a crop producer coming. We have vegetable growers who's using building kind of micro ecosystems with using beneficial insects to help control pests and disease. We've got, speaking of the development pressure, we have a vegetable grower in the Orlando area who has talked about, getting offers on his land every week. And, that's not what his family wants to do to sell. They want to keep growing. They used reclaimed water. We've got quite a few different examples of innovations. We couldn't get into all of them here today because they're just so expansive, and hopefully that report will provide some more rich examples of circularity and innovation with those common strands that are just among all producers of wanting to care for the land and do right by their communities as well. And I believe that report will be, we're wrapping it up now, and I believe it'll be coming out later this year.
Great. We'll look forward to seeing it. So in our remaining 5 minutes, I'm going to do a lightning round and give each of you 1 minute to answer a question. So Florida Climate Week will be viewed by this webinar will be viewed by folks from all across the state, and many, if not most, won't be farmers, won't be from agriculture. So given that, if you had 1 minute to deliver a message to the audience, what would it be? What would you want them to leave with? Megan, let's start with you. Oh, and you're on mute.
Thank you for the reminder. I guess the big picture item that I'd want the general consumer to know is that farmers care. Regardless of how difficult it might be and the pressures that we especially see as Florida producers with extreme weather events, we are always mindful of what we are doing on our respective production systems and how that affects both our land, our animals, and our community, because we're producing something that we're consuming and that we're feeding our families. And so I think, just big picture is that farmers in this state do their best job at trying to protect the assets that they have, and that being those green spaces that are providing so many ecosystem benefits across a state that has a tremendous population.
Great. Thank you. Great message. John Dooner, what's your message?
Yeah, Ernie, I would say to think about the value of green space, to Megan's point. Think about the value of working lands, and think about what our state would look like if they all went away. What would our waterways look like? What would our estuaries look like? What would our quality of life be like? It's a scary proposition, and so that's really, for me, that hits home. What would our quality of life look like if we didn't have these agricultural lands?
Great. Thank you. Ed?
Support local producers. Support your local farmers. Go to your local farm markets. Ask questions. Where is this product coming from? When you're at a restaurant, Ask them where the seafood, where is their shrimp coming from? Where is their fish coming from? Take the first step in your household. Grow microgreens. Change the fertilizers that you're using on your lawn. All of this supports local economies and moves us more towards the systems that we had before all of this got conglomeratized and all done by in huge, large scales. We need to get back to local.
Great. Well, thank you very much to our producer panel, to our science foundation, to our writer team here. This has been a wonderful conversation. And my hope is that the viewers will come away with a better appreciation for agriculture and forestry and think of it not just about a production platform for food or fiber, but the platform that improves their quality of life. And this goes back to the name of our organization, Solutions from the Land. These producers are working every day in a continuous improvement mode to deliver the outcomes that Floridians enjoy, appreciate, and want to continue. So again, thank you to Volo Foundation for the opportunity to put this program on Florida Climate Week, and we look forward to seeing you next year at the next Climate Week. Thank you, panel members. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye. Okay. I'll hit stop recording if I know how to do that and see if you have any questions. Stop recording. Are you sure you want to stop recording to